Hello. Our topic today is decoding of the human research ethics principles in order to seek Research Ethics Committee or REC or IRB approval. I'm Professor Khalid Khan. I'm based at the University of Granada in Spain, but today I am presenting this video to you from Kazakhstan, where I am visiting the university and medical school. I have published a book on clinical trials where I explain in detail how an ethics committee application should be prepared. The key principles are outlined here, and this video will focus on how to decode these into a study protocol concerning a research project that you will submit to a human research ethics committee for approval before you can commence your study. So let's get going. The ethics principles are moral values for guiding the researcher during their research project. And these are the four key ethics principles: justice, beneficence, autonomy, and non-maleficence. So let's look at these, how they apply with respect to the planning of application to research ethics committee. So you're going to conduct a study, but before you can commence, the ethics committee is going to make an assessment, and it's going to assess your submitted application, which includes the protocol, in detail against these principles. The key principles of non-maleficence and autonomy relate to the risk to the participants as they are going to serve in their capacity as human subject in the study, and that this is explained to them in detail so they can provide an informed consent. The informed consent element relates to the human right to self-determination, and the explanation concerning the risk relates to honesty with respect to the description of the possible risks associated with taking part. Now, once the study is completed, the work will be published in form of scientific papers, and from the use of this paper, a benefit may arise in society. We'll come back to explain what beneficence means shortly. But the element of justice relates to balancing the risk to the individual taking part in the study and the benefit to society, largely to people who have not taken in any role in the study at some time in the future following publication of the completed study. The key thing to remember here is that the ethical approval will be granted, but it will be with the knowledge that the usefulness of the completed work is in form of some type of benefit to society, the benefit to the scientist in their career through the publication of papers is not really of any consideration in the ethical principle as far as uh, the study ethics approval is concerned. Of course, it is important that the work should be published because at this stage, it is then ready for use in knowledge transfer. But the fact that it is published alone as a benefit to the scientist's career is not of key relevance in the ethical committee decision. Let's now look at justice and beneficence in a bit more detail. The key issue here is that the researchers making application should be able to demonstrate that there is a significant disease burden that they are going to address through the proposed study. The societal priority is a key issue because if you address a problem of low priority, then the possibility that society can benefit greatly as a result of a completed study compared to a problem with a greater disease burden is lower. And this would be taken into account when balancing the potential benefit against the risks to the participants. Participant eligibility criteria are particularly important because you cannot just do a study with very narrow, limited criteria focusing on particular risk groups. You got to think about the diversity of the target population in the healthcare setting that is likely to benefit from the study that you are undertaking. Therefore, the eligibility criteria should closely match and should be broad uh, with respect to capturing the characteristics of the population that is expected to benefit following the research study. The research translation element is particularly important. For example, if you're going to evaluate the benefit of a treatment, then you got to measure patient relevant outcomes. You cannot just measure surrogate outcomes. Also, the intervention should be evaluated in the same way as it will be used in the healthcare setting, not necessarily under an ideal protocol that is not replicable in real life. Finally, in conducting the study, you as a researcher have got to give a guarantee to the ethics committee that you're going to undertake the work with integrity without engaging in any misconduct, and you will declare your conflicts of interest transparently. Pre-registration of the study before patients are recruited and data sharing at the time of publication are two key important elements of research integrity, and your protocol should demonstrate that this is what you intend to do following ethics committee approval. Your protocol should also highlight the uncertainty of the evidence concerning the hypothesis that you're going to test. It makes no sense to mindlessly repeat previously concluded work. There must be a solid justification for conducting a new research project because the risks participants put them through in the course of the study will not be justified if the repetition is simply for the sake of repetition. Of course, if there is a justification that the new intervention ought to be tested in a new setting, then that would be um, the correct manner in which the study will be presented to participants for their consent. In order to ensure that we have prioritized correctly, that the criteria for eligibility are correct, that the intervention and outcome are correct, and that they match what is required in terms of knowledge need at the stage of knowledge transfer after study publication. It's very important that the community should be engaged as a co-investigator in the co-production of the research project. The community engagement, therefore, is often defined as the act of including citizens with a view to obtaining their input for planning and conduct of the study rather than simply to include them as subjects inside a research project. Obviously, the study design should have methodological robustness so that it is free as much as possible of risk of bias and has a high level of validity to be able to establish cause and effect relationships. And importantly, it should be able to be conducted with integrity, without cutting corners, and meeting all the professional standards required of the researcher. In ensuring that integrity standards are met, community participation can also be a source of oversight or encouragement for researchers to stick to the rules and to their own protocol in the course of the study after its approval. So, in summary, the issue related to the principle of justice is that the benefit is accrued after completion of the study for some time in the future, and the risk is borne by the participants who take part as subjects in the study. And the risk ought to be justifiable in respect of the scientific justification of the hypothesis, the disease burden, and the publication produced should have a chance of being able to use in the process of knowledge transfer to help future patients. That said, we can now move to the issue of non-maleficence and autonomy. Here, the key issue is that the participants may accrue some benefit by being looked after through additional staff who uh, are employed for the purpose of undertaking the study. But in effect, their participation is truly an act of altruism. In this case, it is extremely important that their safety and their human rights are monitored throughout the course of the study. The protocol must describe this in detail. And the information concerning the risks uh, compared to the justification of the scientific hypothesis and the potential benefits in the future ought to be fully described in a patient information leaflet, which should be co-authored with input of the community partners engaged in the co-production of the project. And there should be a consent form that should also be developed with their input. There should also be a clearly stated data and privacy protection plan inside the protocol. With this all described in the protocol, there should be a section that summarizes the entire body of evidence concerning the risks, both the risks of taking part and the risks of the intervention or exposure. But this risk, the ethics committee has to balance against the risk of the condition or disease that afflicts the potential participants. And the hope that in the future, the risk of the disease can be ameliorated through the use of a positive finding from the completed study. Once all of this is assessed, the committee is then in a position to give ethics approval, and with this, it is possible to proceed with the recruitment of the first patients after the study has been prospectively registered. So with this, I hope you have a good idea of how the four ethics principles can be decoded with respect to what the protocol should state and cover in order to satisfy the ethics committee concerning the justification against the ethical principles. Thank you for listening.